What if you woke up in the worst year in human history? Not on a battlefield, not in a throne room, just there. An ordinary person with no rank, no wealth, no warning. The sun is fading behind a haze that won't lift. The crops are already dead, and no one can tell you why. Or maybe it's a different kind of nightmare, the streets emptying not from war, but from a plague that moves faster than rumor, carried along every trade road you depend on. Or perhaps the grain exists somewhere, stacked in warehouses, but someone in power has decided your region won't receive it. Could you survive any of that? This countdown ranks 5 years that pushed ordinary human life closest to the breaking point. Years defined by volcanic darkness, relentless hunger, unstoppable contagion, and political choices that turned scarcity into mass death. We're moving from the most survivable to the one almost nobody could have endured. It begins with a summer that never arrived. In the 5th place, the year 1816 CE shows how quickly a stable planet can freeze. Before the crisis, farmers across Europe and North America expected a normal harvest. But the sudden eruption of Mount Tambora in the Pacific threw millions of tons of dust into the atmosphere, blocking the sun. By June, a grey haze settled over the sky, bringing summer snow and freezing rain. If you walked out to your fields, you found the corn rotted into brown mush. Food prices tripled. To survive, families turned to desperate measures, digging up frost-bitten turnips and boiling wild kelp with scraps of salted pork just to keep their children alive. Some packed their wagons and migrated west, hoping to find warmer soil. Survival was more achievable here than in other historic disasters, because alternative foods like potatoes and coastal fish kept mortality lower. Still, if you woke up in this endless winter with no electricity, no grocery stores, and nothing but damp, frozen fields, your survival would depend entirely on how long you could endure on a diet of boiled seaweed. In the 4th place, the year 1316 CE shows how a slow, merciless weather anomaly can completely break human society. Northern Europe was trapped in consecutive years of cold rain, leaving fields permanently waterlogged. If you stepped outside, you found the soil had turned to mud and the wheat had rotted straight in the ground. The price of bread tripled almost overnight, and soon local markets emptied entirely. To survive, families turned to the surrounding woodlands, gathering acorns and digging up bitter roots to boil into a fibrous porridge. Some rural communities relied on the charity of local monasteries, which opened their granaries to share meager rations of barley. But as winter stores vanished and the next planting season failed again, people were forced to eat their precious seed grain and slaughter draft animals just to buy a few more weeks of life. This prolonged, grinding starvation made 1316 far harder to survive than other climatic crises. If you woke up in a 14th century village under these unyielding rains, you would have to watch your entire food supply slowly dissolve, knowing that no help was coming. In the 3rd place, the years 1943 and 1944 in Bengal show how administrative decisions can turn a bad harvest into a catastrophic famine. Before the crisis, rural families relied on local rice crops to survive the winter. But as World War II escalated, a weak monsoon combined with a devastating British wartime policy. Fearful of a Japanese invasion, colonial authorities implemented a strict denial strategy, seizing boats, requisitioning rice for military stockpiles, and restricting grain shipments. Almost overnight, rural granaries emptied, and the price of rice rose 6-fold. If you walked down the dusty paths of a Bengal village, you would see families selling their land and tools just to buy a single meal. To survive, people turned to wild roots, boiled bark, or whatever raw fish they could pull from muddy waters. Women formed small collectives, pooling dry lentils to boil thin porridges in communal kitchens, while men walked hundreds of miles to tea plantations in Assam, hoping to earn a daily wage. Official relief arrived too late, and over 2 million people died. If you woke up there, stripped of your belongings and watching the price of a basic bowl of rice climb beyond your daily reach while military trains carried food past your home, surviving would require enduring a man-made blockade designed to prioritize war over your life. In the second place, the year 1348 CE shows how quickly a biological threat can dismantle the foundation of human society. While earlier crises were driven by weather and failing crops, the Black Death brought a danger that moved faster than any weather anomaly. The pandemic, caused by a lethal bacterium, swept through Mediterranean ports and European trade routes, turning bustling cities into silent tombs within weeks. If you walked the streets of Florence or Siena, you would hear the constant toll of funeral bells, breathe in the heavy stench of decay, and see markets shuttered. Storing grain or preparing for a cold winter did not protect you against an invisible killer carried by fleas on rats. If you woke up in a 14th century city, your immediate dilemma would be whether to stay and face infection or flee to the countryside. Fleeing to rural kin offered the best chance of survival, away from dense urban centers and quarantined harbors where ships sat idle under black flags. But even in the hills, you had to avoid travelers who might carry the sickness. Survivors relied on basic isolation, working for food in fields where labor was suddenly scarce. It was deadlier than climatic failures because the pathogen could erase an entire household in days. If you had to face this winter, knowing that your next breath could bring a sudden, agonizing fever, your survival would depend entirely on your ability to cut all ties with the outside world. And finally, in first place, the year 536 CE shows how a broken sky can trigger a global domino effect of starvation and disease. Before this catastrophe, ancient civilizations across Europe, Asia, and the Americas relied on predictable seasonal cycles. But massive volcanic eruptions in the northern hemisphere spewed a thick veil of sulfate aerosols into the stratosphere, blocking the sun. For 18 months, a dim grey fog choked the sky, turning midday into a cold, eerie twilight with no shadows. In China, snow fell in August, while across Europe, temperatures plummeted by over 2 degrees. Crops rotted in the damp chill, causing a global failure of bread. If you woke up in this perpetual dusk, you would find your fields barren, with no warmth to ripen the grain. To survive, coastal communities scavenged for shellfish and dried seaweed, while forest families gathered bitter acorns and stripped oak bark for fuel. In some valleys, starving refugees relied on monastic granaries, hoping for a meager cup of raw barley. But this freezing darkness was only the first blow. The prolonged malnutrition left populations completely defenseless against the devastating Justinianic plague that arrived soon after, wiping out nearly half of the Byzantine Empire. If a modern person were thrown into this endless winter under a dead sun, with no electricity, no global supply chains, and no warning, surviving the sudden, prolonged collapse of the entire natural order would push human endurance past its absolute breaking point. These crises prove how incredibly fragile our normal life truly is. When climate and society collapse, survival becomes an extraordinary feat of endurance. Which year do you think you could survive? Explore more survival history in our next video. Please subscribe for more deep dives.